No more researching, no more looking around, no more trying to find this video and that video and put on all these different videos just to learn how to do it on one step. This video will teach you everything you need to know on how to start a self-care podcast. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. Welcome to Digitally Connected Podcast. This is a podcast about self-care and how it's so important to pour into ourselves and pour into our own cup, because we can't do anything from an empty cup. So it's important to put ourselves first and to make sure that we are putting ourselves on the calendar. Self-care builds self-confidence, which is self-love. We are also a faith-based podcast because we cannot do this life journey without God. We will be sharing our spiritual relationship with God and how you can build and have a personal relationship with God, and staying can really save us from going down the wrong path. But if you're already there, well, God is right there with you too. So join me on my faith journey with God and how we can slay the spiritual warfare and attacks, because I don't know about you, but for me, oh, please believe me that spiritual warfare be real and it be wanting to clock teeth so bad. But God said, although we walk through the valley, okay, period. Lastly, we are a business podcast teaching you all things business. And if you want to learn how to start a self-care podcast, whether video or audio or both, well, you came to the right podcast, because we're going to be teaching you how to start and grow a podcast. But let's do it together, because I've actually started over myself with my new podcast, but I'm not starting over from scratch. I'm starting over from experience. So on this podcast, we will be sharing how to become a content creator, how to build a personal brand, and why you need one, streams of income ideas. Let's get organized in our business and have a structured weekly routine, business workflow, and so much more. So let's face it, if you're trying out this new journey of life, you're definitely going to need God and a new podcast friend who can bring you all the tea. So welcome all my new self-care podcast baddies, and let's have some fun. All right. And if you're listening to us on the Spotify, Apple Podcast, then make sure you hit that download button, because it does help our podcast to grow. And if you are watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that we can self-care channel as well. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's get right into the podcast episode. Welcome, hey, my new YouTube fam. Welcome to Self-Care, Faith, and Business Podcast, where we share just that, self-care, faith, and business. So, today's episode is going to be how to actually start your own self-care podcast. And by the way, my name is Nicole, and I'm your podcast host for today's podcast episode. With that being said, let's jump over. So, with that being said, let's get started. So, how to start your self-care podcast. So I want to give a little bit background before I begin into the steps. I just want to share the reason why I'm sharing how to start a self-care podcast is because I feel like it's a missing market with us content creators, and I don't really see anyone like me teaching it the way I'm going to teach it, because I like to teach. I like to break it down by steps. I learn by breaking it down by series. So and just step by step. I need a step-by-step formula. So that's why I'm sharing with you my gems and what I learned hands-on with starting my self-care podcast. Also, I did learn a lot from other content creators, but those content creators, I felt like as though that they were the end goal in mind, because they are already huge macro content creators. They already are living out their dream life. They're already doing big things and accomplishing big things in their career, in their entrepreneurship career. And I felt like I couldn't relate to, I'm not saying that I can't relate, but I feel like those bigger content creators are the end goal dream, so but I did share a lot I did learn a lot from those creators, which we will be getting into that as well in today's podcast episode. But I just felt like I want to share my own way on how you can start your self-care podcast. No more researching, no more looking around, no more trying to find this video and that video and put all these different videos just to learn how to do it on one step. This video will teach you everything you need to know on how to start a self-care podcast. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. So step number 1, the first thing you should do is choose a niche or choose the top 3 niches that you can create podcast topics about consistently. So the good news is we already know what our niche is, which is self-care. So it's important to really have a niche, have a thing where you know have a thing of where you know who you are going to be talking to. So I feel like for me, self-care is definitely important, and you could bring others throughout your journey, on your self-care journey, and basically loving on yourself and just being accountable and holding yourself accountable and just pouring into yourself, because I feel as though like when you pour, you cannot pour from an empty cup. That cup overflow. So that's why I feel like self-care is definitely important. I did have a self-care channel as well, a self-care YouTube channel, but I got convicted and God told me to delete my channel. If you haven't watched my first my first podcast episode on this channel, please make sure you watch our first podcast episode. The link will be in the description box below. But yeah, so choose a niche or your top 3 niches in your self-care with your self-care niche. So let's go ahead and create our top 3 niches. So here are 3 content pillars, ideas for your podcast. So number 1, self-care. These are just a list. So this is not really 3 self-care content, but these are your pillars. So so the first thing we did, we already know our self-care niche. Now we are going to talk about our actual content pillars. These are content pillars that you can consistently make podcast episodes about. So I'm just going to run off the list to you, and then we can go from there. So these are some content pillar ideas for your self-care podcast. Self-care ideas and self-care routines, personal development, life lessons and experiences you've had in life and what you learned from, relationship advice. Now, a relationship advice is a saturated market in the industry, but I feel as though like I would steer away a little bit from relationship advice, because I feel like nowadays there's a lot going on with the relationship podcast, and it's sometimes I feel like it's unsolicited advice too, like, and sometimes we have so much different views, and like I feel as though we consumers, or we all take people's opinions seriously too. So I just feel like be careful with that area, but you could definitely talk about relationship advice, just things that you already went through. But I mean, if you want to start a relationship advice podcast, then go for it. But I would steer just from relationship advice, but just focus on you. Or if you in a relationship, I wouldn't really talk about my relationship. Personally, me, like, I wouldn't build my brand off of that, because I've seen a lot of couples channels, they build a channel, and then after a while when they break up, then what? You still gotta, you still gotta market your channel or post on your channel. So yeah, I don't know, take what you want from that, but yeah, I would definitely say stay away from relationship advice. But also too, other content pillars is how you can have the ultimate glow up as a woman, and story times on how you Now story times definitely do good with especially with YouTube. If you got a good story time, yeah, you could definitely run your podcast just with different story times that you had throughout your experiences. Because I know for me, I had a lot of experiences, okay, in my 20s. It went down, okay? It went down in my 20s, okay? Like, it really did, and I learned from them things, and I really do feel like a lot of young girls should share my story more so that a lot of young girls don't go down the same path as me. And I feel as though, let me say this too, like sin is really, 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 really serious, and you don't know who you connecting yourself to. So it's really important to wait to have kids, wait to have sex, just wait. Get your stuff together, get your own self together, get your head in the books, and start a side hustle and focus on you, because them boys and all that can come later. Like, let God fill you up. And I know that, young girls, we young, we just having fun. No, fun and being young, no, like right now, these times is, you will eventually have to pay for your sins at the end. So yeah, I just thought I would put that in there. But story times is definitely a good one, especially for YouTube. And I feel like I love listening to story times on podcasts as well. Like when I used to drive to work, I would put on a podcast and hear all these story times. So story times are definitely a good content pillar to include in your podcast, because we all can have a little, kiki moment, so yeah. So step number one, just a real mini recap of step number one, is choose a niche in your content pillar. So the niche that we chose was self-care, and we also went over the content pillars as well, which is self-care, personal development, story times, relationship advice, and how to glow up as a woman. Now, these are actual my content pillars that I will be using for my self-care podcast. And you might be asking, well, why are you sharing this if you're going to use this for your podcast? We are all on different timelines, and we are all on different paths. So the way that you self-care could be different from the way I self-care. So it's always room for more. Like, I feel as though, like, I need to hear your voice. I need to see what you look like. I need to hear your voice. And I want to share. I want to see, most people want to relate to you as well too. So just because we in the same niche, it can be done plenty of different ways. Math, it has different numbers, and the numbers still be adding up to the same number, whether it's a different number or not. So I just want to keep that in mind, because I know, everybody is doing it. Everybody a content creator. Everybody got a podcast. Everybody got this. But I'm telling you, like, I would definitely say start a podcast. And it just also starting a podcast too is just getting you into being more creative, spending more time with being creative and being productive with your time, so start that podcast. Let's get on our Zoom. Okay, period. Okay. So step number 2, now that you created now that you know your self-care niche, now that you know your podcast niche and who your target audience is. So basically your self-care niche is your target audience on who, you're going to be speaking with. Now, what I didn't really touch on target audience, which I will be touching on target audience in my ebook, but I would say, like, choose a target audience within the self-care niche. Now, there are 2 different types of self-care niche that I should have mentioned earlier. One is like, you're just sharing your own personal way of how you self-care and how you live up on yourself. And then this is the clinical side where, you're into the medical field, and you're really serious about chemicals that goes on your face, and maybe, you want to learn more about the clinical side and the clinical research, and really teaching the self-care in the clinical way. But for me, I feel as though I like the entertainment side, the self-care entertainment side, which I hate to say self-care is entertainment, because it's not. Self-care is really just definitely important to definitely have. So now you know your niche. You also know your target audience, which in your niche, which is self-care. And also you have a list of content pillars. Now, I hope that you have a pen and notebook, because these gems, we dropping them gems, okay? By the way, if you have not, we do have a stationery brand, which is right here. This are our bestseller stationery brand. We are a stationery brand for content creators and business owners who love to get things done in their business. So if that sounds like you, then you want to make sure you stay tuned for our stationery launch, where we launching our stationery brand, our handbag brand, all of the things. So you want to just stay tuned and join in on the journey, okay? And make sure that the next time we upload our podcast, you have your stationery notebooks in hand so you could get these gems, okay? So yeah, so let's keep going. So, okay, so step number two. Step number two. Step number two is brainstorm a list of podcast topics, ideas that that you're actually going to create for your podcast. So yeah, so it's definitely important to brainstorm a list before you start planning out your content. That way you will have some ideas to run off of, and you won't be trying to scatter around and saying, oh, what episode should I post, or what should I come up with today. You will already have that done by listening out brainstorm of podcast episodes for your podcast. So this is how I brainstorm a list of podcast episode, and I'm also going to share with you to create. It's so important to try to create a storyline for your podcast so that people can so that you can get your audience to wanting to come back to your podcast. And I hate to say, but we do not want a one-hit wonder with our podcast. So that's why it's definitely important to brainstorm a list of podcast episodes so that you can have reoccurring podcast episodes, and staying consistent. It will also help you stay consistent. Now, me, I would say at least a good I hate to use a number, but if I could use a number, I would say at least between 10 and 30 podcast episode ideas. But we could talk more about like the planning and how many podcast episodes should you upload when you first get started, and etc. But here is how I break my brainstorm down into series. So with our content pillars, we're going to choose at least 2 to 3 content pillars from our we're going to choose 2 to 3 different themes for our podcast. So basically, you're going to so from our podcast, from our content pillars that we have created, those can be your actual theme for the week. So one of our content pillars that we created was self-care ideas and self-care routines. So those are your actual themes that you can create. So you could create a weekly theme. So self-care for the week is the theme for the week podcast episodes is self-care ideas. So let me just share with you we already chose our theme, which is self-care. What it was again? Hold on. Self-care ideas and self-care routines. So with that being said, let's break that down. So I already done created about a part 1 through part 3 series of for self-care. So the first one for self-care is the podcast topic episode. So once you find your theme, which is self-care ideas and self-care routines, the next thing you're going to do is create a podcast topic. So my podcast topic that I chose is how I'm finding myself as a woman. So podcast episode part 1. How can I start porn? So this is what the podcast is going to be about. Well, the series. This is basically a mini strategy on like taking your brainstorm from just a brainstorm list and actually creating a storyline for your podcast. So podcast episode part 1. How can I start pouring into myself, and what are my triggers that makes me upset or emotional? And lastly, how can I fix my emotional and mental health? And working on yourself is a lot of hard work, and dealing with depression and anxiety and spiritual warfare. You can go lead in more into that side of. So this is working on your mental, emotional well-being. So that's podcast episode part 1, how I'm finding myself as a woman, or like how I can better get better with my mental health. Now podcast episode part 2, what are 3 ways to learn how to love yourself? I'm going on my self-love journey, and I'm bringing you along with me. So you could explain more about how ways that you research on how to love yourself, and how you're going to start pouring into yourself, and why pouring into yourself is so important. So you see how my brainstorm list. So I'm actually taking you along throughout my brainstorm, but I'm also breaking it down as series. So with the brainstorm ideas, this is the brainstorm ideas. So brainstorm podcast ideas, how I'm finding myself as a woman. What are 3 ways to learn to love? What are 3 different ways to learn how to love yourself? And you're sharing those 3 different ways on how you can love yourself. And yeah, you're showing those 3 ways how you can love yourself. Also, this is another brainstorm, is figuring out by doing some research about how to start loving yourself. So this is podcast part 3, or podcast episode 3, I should say. Figuring out how to love myself by doing research, and how to start loving on me. And here's what I've learned and found about my own personal ways that I can, show up and love on myself every day. So those are just 3 different brainstorms, podcast ideas. Now, if you need a full list of podcast ideas, make sure you grab my free podcast ideas checklist, which will be available in the description box below. You do not want to regret not getting that ebook. It is a free ebook, so that you can start off with consistent podcast episodes for your podcast. But those were just our 3, and we're going to even more in depth on how to break that down. So part 2 of the series is doing the most top 3 things to pour into myself, which is number 1, journaling, number 2, creating a AM routine and a PM routine, number 3, reading books about personal development and loving on yourself. And here's my own take about starting your own self-love journey. And yeah, here's my own take on how on starting my own self-love journey. Also, part 3 is self-development, and what that means to me and what goes into self-development. The part of self-development that I want to start working on is my appearance. How can we elevate our wardrobe, our style, and how can we bring our own uniqueness to ourselves? So those are just a list of brainstorms, and I actually broke this down. Now, don't worry, I have a full freebie guide on brainstorming and planning out your content. It would definitely help you to kickstart your podcast. If you need any more help, that free ebook will be available in the link description box below. So make sure you download your free ebook today in the description box below, because this is a good way to kickstart your podcast with just knowing the podcast episodes that you're going to create, and you already have a podcast. You already have podcast episode ideas from my list of podcast SelfCare podcast brainstorm list from my freebie ebook in the description box below. So make sure you go purchase that. Not purchase that, I'm sorry. Make sure you download my free ebook so it can help you, So I hope all of these things are making sense so far. Comment down below if this is helping you so far with how to start your self-care podcast. So just a real quick, what we did so far. Step 1, we already chose a niche. And we chose our target audience within that niche, which is self-care. And we also created content pillars, a list of content pillars. So that was step 1. Step 2, we created a brainstorm. We actually brainstormed a list of podcast topic ideas that you're actually going to create for your podcast show. And we also even created a series of our podcast so that you can stay consistent. With your podcast. Okay, so from that brainstorm, from our brainstorm list, we're actually going to start planning out our podcast episodes. So it's not everywhere, but I'm gonna post it out. So we're gonna actually start planning out our content plan. So okay, so as a beginner, I feel as though this is what I'm doing as a beginner to get back into podcasting again, and starting off is post 1 podcast episode per week. So that's 4 different it's 4 weeks in a month. So you only need to come up with 4 different ideas for your podcast. So with that being said, from our brainstorm, we already brainstormed a list of 3 different podcast episode ideas. And I'm just going to give you a 4th one, which is personal development. So the 4 different So the 4 different podcast episodes are that you're going to plan out for your first week is how can I start pouring into myself and loving myself first. So that's podcast number 1 is basically how I'm finding myself as a woman. Podcast number 2 is what are 3 ways to learn how to love myself, and you're going to go in with those 3 things, which is number 1, journaling, number 2, creating a AM and PM routine, nighttime routine, and number 3, reading books about personal development and finding out more ways about how to love yourself. And number 4 is personal self development or personal development, and you know what that means to you and what area of personal development that you want to focus on, which we mentioned earlier is our appearance and how we can elevate our wardrobe and style and bring a uniqueness to ourselves. So those are 4 different podcast episodes for 4 different podcast episodes, 1 podcast episode per week. So far, what we did so far was we chose a self-care niche. Well, we chose a niche. We created our content pillars. And we chose our niche for our podcast, which is self-care. We chose our target audience, which I'm going to make an ebook about, like a free mini ebook about more in depth about how to actually choose your target audience. But stay tuned for more podcast episodes because we will be sharing more about that as well. But yeah, so we chose our self-care niche. We chose our target audience. We went ahead and created our content pillars. We brainstormed a list of podcast episodes, and we also planned out a full month of podcast episodes. So that's 4 podcast episodes within a month, 1 podcast episode per week, just to get our foot in the door. So I feel as though staying consistent to me, just pick one day out of the week where you could commit to and uploading and posting your podcast. Now let's get into step number 4. Figure out if you want to do an audio podcast or video podcast or both. Now with my podcast, I do both. Let me make sure this is still on too as well. Yeah, it's still on. Okay. So with me, I actually have both. So I do an audio podcast as well as a video portion of it. And I feel as though for me personally, the more streams of income, the better. Okay, and we'll talk more about the streams of income at the end because that's later down in the podcast episode, because we will be sharing streams of income ideas. But for now, audio, Spotify does have an ads program where you can enter once you reach your threshold, and you can start getting income from your Spotify, from ads, and also from your YouTube channel. So I would definitely say do both. But if you can't do both, then start out with audio because it's so much easier. You don't have to come up online. You don't have to do your makeup. You don't have to look good. You don't have to look presentable. You could just, nobody sees you. You could just press that record button, and there you go. You start your podcast, So, but I would definitely recommend video, is because video brings more of your viewers in. They know what you look like. They see you, they see how you interact, they see how you talk on camera, and how you present yourself, and it's more relatable when you have a face behind the screen. But you don't necessarily need a video. You don't need to do both, but it's just time to figure out whether you want to do an audio podcast or video podcast. So figure out your content creation style, and also I would say choose what best fits for you for the algorithm and which is faster. That's why I'm testing out now. This is why I'm doing both, because I want to experiment, see what is like. Now I would say this though. I do like the audio version too of Spotify, is because it's like very low key, laid back, and you know they don't share, like you don't necessarily have to see, nobody had to see how many downloads you're getting, nobody has to see how much people are subscribed. I mean, you can hide those things, but I feel like an audio podcast is definitely chill and laid back, and it's your own radio show, you know. So if you don't want to do video, you know, just do your own personal radio show, you know. So that's why I call it a radio show, you know. All right, so step number 5. So you already chose whether you was going to do audio or video. So step number 5, start scripting out your podcast episodes. It's so important to start scripting out your podcast episodes because start scripting. So now we're in the scripting process. Start scripting out your podcast episodes. So the reason why you should definitely start scripting out your podcast episodes is because you want to know exactly what you're saying when you press the record button. You don't want to be like stuttering or going all over the place and not knowing like exactly what you're going to be saying. So it's definitely important to script out exactly what you're going to be saying in the podcast episodes so that, you know, your audience can relate to you more, and you know they can come back for more because your podcast script just flow. So you want a flowing podcast audio experience, or you know, a YouTube video experience as well. So tips on scripting out your podcast. So tips on scripting out your podcast episodes. So since we already talked about content planning and brainstorming, you know, within a podcast, try to come up with at least 3 to 4 different topics that within that podcast episode that you can talk about. So the way to make it easier, 3 ways So if we going back earlier, 3 ways that I can pour into myself. Number 1, which is journaling. Number 2, which is, you know, focusing on our mental health. Number 3, focusing on our appearance. So those are 3 different topics that you can actually talk about within the site and within your podcast episode. Now you can type when it comes to actually scripting, now you can type it as you're going, like you could type as you talk. So you know, you can write it in the essay form or type it as word for word, you know, word for word, or you could use the 5 sentences method. You know, 5 sentences make up a paragraph, and you could make 2 to 3 or more, however long you want your podcast to be. I say the longer the better because I feel as though you can get a connection. You know, most of the time when people are listening to podcasts, they're either cleaning up. I know for me, when I listen to podcasts, I'm cleaning up, I'm washing the dishes, or I'm working on my business, and I like to throw a podcast episode, or while I'm getting ready to do content, like, you know, doing my hair or doing my makeup, I like to throw on a long podcast episode where it like I'm listening and I'm learning at the same time, and I'm also, you know, working in my business. So that's just how I listen to podcasts. And for me, video, which I was going to share more down on the line with this, but the reason why I like video podcasts is because after I had a long day, I done did all I had to do with my business, or, you know, after a long day of work, you want to come home, you want to get your wine, you want to light your candle, and you want to turn on a good podcast on YouTube, you know. So, and nowadays, YouTube streaming has so much more viewership and time spent on YouTube than the actual streaming service. So yeah, I did a little bit of research. So yes, so YouTube is definitely you can't go wrong with having a YouTube channel. So yeah, I would definitely say do both, because and also you could cross promote, and also you're gaining different audience on both audio and video. But going back to scripting too, really quick, I would say too is I'm trying to experiment with different learning formats, whether you know, I list my script out in bullet points, or if it works better for doing word for word. So I feel like for me, I do feel like it's better to bullet point, so that that way I won't get tongue tied. I know what I'm saying, and it just helps me to look at, you know, my script and then I don't have to do word for word, and it'll just confuse me, you know. So yes, step number 5 is scripting out your podcast episodes so that you can have a flowing, consistent podcast. And you know, it's like you're having a conversation. So you're not just having a conversation with you. You know, you have to keep in mind that once you post your podcast episode, now you can communicate and conversate with everybody. You know what I'm saying? Everybody that want to tune into your podcast. You know, so yeah. Okay, step number 6. Let's get into step number 6. Step number 6 is start creating a launch formula for your podcast. So I did create my own launch forms. I did create a mini launch formula for you as well. So let me start that over. So you don't just want to automatically just post your podcast and say, hey, we got a podcast, you know, come watch. No, you want to be able to build up the momentum and the anticipation to want to launch your podcast and have listeners the actual day that you're launching your podcast. So your podcast launch formula strategy should include your social media weekly content plan, your YouTube content if you're doing both audio and video. So if you're doing YouTube and Spotify, you definitely want to have a content plan, which we created our content plan in step number 4, which was 4 different podcast episodes for 4 different weeks, 1 podcast episode per week. Now I know this sounds a lot, but don't worry, we will have something for you available so that it can help you more with with corresponding to what I'm saying. But so you should have your podcast launch formula strategy, should have your YouTube channel content and your Spotify or audio podcast content plan, as well as your email and Substack. Now in the next coming videos, I will definitely talk about email marketing and stuff and Substack. Those things are definitely important, and that could definitely be another stream of income, especially with Substack. So I just found out a little bit about Substack, and by the way, these 10 steps that I'm sharing will be available on my Substack as well as a paid ebook on my Substack. But stay tuned for our next podcast episode. We're going to share with you how we're going to use Substack, how we're going to actually launch our Substack, and what our Substack is definitely going to be about, and what is a Substack. And do you still need email marketing with a Substack account? So we're going to talk all about that as well. But so your launch formula, you should definitely include a social media weekly content plan, your YouTube channel and your audio podcast content plan, email and Substack should definitely be in your content plan, and also word of mouth. Now word of mouth still works, but for me, if I'm doing word of mouth, please, I mentioned this in my makeup series. So if you're not following me on social media, please make sure you're following me on social media. I mentioned this in my social media, please. Or I think I mentioned this in my first podcast episode as well. Please do not tell your family and friends. Bless you. Please do not tell your family and friends about what you are doing. Please do not share with your neighborhoods. These people will broadcast your stuff and try to mock you, make fun of you, or they would hate you, or they would hate on your content because they feel as though they would hate you because maybe they feel like they can't do it. But if I'm sharing gems on teaching you how to start, why can't what I'm saying? I feel as though we need to work in our self-confidence a little bit more. But please do not share your content. Please do not share what you do. Please do not share about what you do. Keep that between you and your business and God. Okay? Well, your business and God, okay? Because I made that mistake, and I feel like now the whole neighborhood know my business, know what I do. And this is why I deleted my first channel and my social media. I literally have to start off from scratch again, because it was just so, and also too, I was facing so much spiritual warfare after I found that the whole neighborhood know about what I do. So it's very important that just do not tell nobody what you do. Now, what you can do, the strategy that I want to start implementing is going to networking events and people who are actually interested in your podcast, and also like-minded individuals, those who are in the same industry as you, or those who are content creators on social media, or those who are content creators on YouTube, and we're all just trying to engage with one another and grow our podcast and network, and just tune in. So that's what I would do, is go to networking events and start marketing yourself in person to networking events with like-minded people who are in the same industry as you. So no more telling your friends, stop being mad because your family and friends don't support your business, or these neighborhood people around here don't support your business, and this and that, and they hate and this and that. Do not worry about that, because that's not your target audience. That's not who the people that you're going to talk to, and quite frankly, they're not into what you're into. So don't take it as offensive. Just take it as like, okay, I know not to say anything more about this business to you about what I got going on. So just a heads up, I would just say that. And I had a self-care shower vlog, so I know that my videos were leaked, and I know that it was shared to people that wasn't supposed to be shared to, because I'm telling you, people just be peopling, okay? Like, yeah. But yeah, just moral of the story, if you do want to share your podcast and use word of mouth, go to networking events who are business owners or online content creators, or those who are like-minded like you, and we're in the same industry, so we're talking the same lingo. We get where we're trying to go. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. So now so back to creating a podcast launch formula for your podcast. So let's go into different even further with the podcast launch. So it's 3 different phases for a podcast launch. You have your pre-launch phase, your launch phase, and your post-launch phase. So let's talk about your pre-launch phase. So I would say, so your pre-launch phase is it's like your introduction. So this is how I break down I have a 6-week process of how I break mine down. So for the first 2 weeks is my pre-launch phase. The remaining 3 weeks is the launch phase, and then the post launch phase is the following 3 weeks. So I guess that's like, I think I said 6 weeks. Yeah, about a month and a half, pretty much 2 months. You're going to be launching your podcast. So within 1 month, you're really in the pre-launch and launch phase, and then the second month is just your post-launch and keeping viewers to come back. So that's when you're building up your retaining audience. So okay, let's talk about content ideas for your pre-launch phase. And how long, I already mentioned that. So let's talk about content ideas for your pre-launch phase. So the pre-launch phase of what I do. So I'm gonna post some TikToks right here of my pre-launch phase, of what some of the things that I posted. So I posted nothing but B-roll content with text on the screen. So I knew that right off the bat that I was going to be teaching people how to start a podcast, or teaching people, like I was already building my content as in the educational realm of the self-care. So maybe your educational piece is, how I'm loving up on me. These are 5 ways that I'm loving up on myself. These are, let's talk about self-development. Let's talk about books that helps me with my entrepreneurship or my self-love journey. Other ways that I'm pouring into myself by keeping up myself with, doing my hair, doing my makeup, and etc. So it's a lot of, if you use your brainstorm and your content pillars and themes, this will definitely help you with your pre-launch phase. So that's why it's so important when I say that you should definitely have your content pillars and your brainstorm podcast outline and scripting and so many things, because this will definitely help you when it comes to launching your podcast. So now let's talk about the launch phase. So I usually say Oh, I already said that already. So let's talk about the lunch phase. So basically, I created a series in a storyline. You know, I'm good for a series in a storyline. So I created a lot of content about you know, I created a storyline in the behind the scenes content on how we got this all done. So take them on a journey to how you bring them on a journey. So that's why I say having a YouTube video portion is so important, because you could share how you created your podcast, you know, how you're, you know, showed up behind the scenes of you creating social media content. Show them how you doing your makeup and your hair and how you're prepping. Show them how, you know, you're editing your podcast episodes, how you're planning out, what are the tools that you're using to plan it out. These are all different behind the scenes content where, you know, you can launch your podcast. Now with a YouTube channel, you could do 4 videos for your YouTube channel for the launch month. So yeah, so you could do 4 different podcast pillars. So let's say you're uploading once per week and you're doing a podcast launch. So first, part 1 is come behind the scenes with me and create content from my podcast. Part 2 is come take personal branded photos with me. Part 3, let's get our wardrobe together for our podcast. Part 4, let's create the graphic and the branding for our podcast. So you see how I'm breaking it down, so you could break your down in the series and get people, you know, to come along on your content creator, you know, your podcast content creator journey. So yeah, and don't worry, all of this will be included in the you know, all of these things will be included in the ebook. So please don't worry. If I hope all of these are making sense and it's coming out, you know, flowing. So step number 7, let's talk about podcast equipment that I use for my podcast. So it's very simple. So for my video, which I started off first was, I started off with my iPhone. This is an iPhone 13. I started off with my iPhone, and all I did was, usually I just turn my iPhone this way, and you know, you could record your content this way, vertical. Is it vertical? Yeah, vertical. And if you're doing social media, you know, you want to do horizontal. So I started off with my iPhone first as for my YouTube channel when it comes to video. And now I use my Sony ZV-1 camera, what I love so much. So yeah, so I start now with my Sony ZV-1. Now, if you want to purchase my camera, my Amazon link will be in the description box below. Now, I must say, it is pricey, so use what you have. If you have your iPhone, because I know nowadays everybody have an iPhone or a high-tech phone, so you should be able to get everything done on your phone. But I'm going to mention this: when you start creating content and you really, you know, you're serious about your YouTube channel and you're serious about podcasting on audio, I would say get a camera, because the storage, every 5 minutes, I'm running out of storage. I'm running out of storage. I'm running out of storage. So this what makes me get a camera, because I was so tired of not having storage on my phone. So I would definitely recommend the Sony ZV-1 as a beginner-friendly camera, because I'm still a beginner too, as in my content creator journey. Even though I feel like I've been doing this for a long time now, like it's been a while. It's been a while. This has definitely been a journey, and I've been changing so many times. I had a mommy channel, I had a self-care channel, I had a business channel, I had so many different channels. It's so many different content things on. I did so. But I would definitely say get the Sony ZV-1. The links will be in the description box below. Next thing is I use my MacBook Air to actually record my podcast episodes. Now on my MacBook Air, I use the GarageBand. GarageBand is where I create a software that I use to actually record my podcast. Now behind me, this is a microphone that I was using, which is the Samsung Q2U microphone. And the cord, for somehow, I don't know, but the cord to the microphone piece itself, the charger piece, it broke, so I couldn't be able to use my microphone. But I'm telling you, my computer gives off good, crisp audio quality as well. And if you don't have a computer, hey, still no excuse, because on your phone you have let me show you, you have the video, the voice app on your phone. So right here, as you can see here, I know it's kind of blurry. So right here, as you can see here, it says the voice memo. You could click that voice memo app, and if you open it, these are some of my voice memos. If it's going to open, it's probably not going to open because I don't have no storage. But you could find on your iPhone. If you have an iPhone, you have a voice memo app. Open that app. All you have to do is click on the app, press the record button, and start your podcast. Now, and then if you don't have a computer, you can upload your podcast. I believe you could edit through the Spotify platform, which is called Riverside. So you could always, edit on your phone as well. But I would definitely recommend getting a MacBook as well. Just getting the proper tools you need, because it would definitely help you with, your podcast and your podcast equipment. So once you have the right equipment, the better it be. But you could do everything from your phone. You could record your podcast from your phone. You could edit through your phone. You could record videos on your phone. You could edit on your phone. You have iMovie and GarageBand on your iPhone, right directly on your iPhone. So please do not let I do not have no fancy equipment at all. Also, the ring light that I am using is the newer ring light. I've been had this ring light for a minute now, and all my podcast equipment will be in the description box below as well, so that you can go ahead and purchase your podcast equipment, which is affordable as well. But if you're just starting off, you could always just use your phone, use the resources that you already have. So I am going to make a podcast episode about just using your resources, using God's resources, using the resources that God already gave you. You do not need no outside resources. You don't have to hurry up and rush, get these different podcast things, and give yourself a milestone. Say, okay, if I hit a certain, let's say if I hit 50, let's say I hit my first 100 podcast subscribers, now I'm gonna go and get a camera, or now I'm gonna go and get a microphone, or now I'm gonna go get, what I'm saying? So you don't have to buy everything at once. But these are the podcast equipment tools that I use, which is my Sony ZV-1, my iPhone 13, my Samsung QTU, my MacBook, and my GarageBand. So all of those things will be linked in the description box below as well. Okay, so now step number 8. Start batch creating your content, and pick out your content batch. Hold on, let me start it again. So step number 8 is batch create your content, and pick out your content creation batch days. So so it's definitely important. Like today, I just batched out 2 podcast episodes, and don't overwhelm yourself. If you know you can't do more than 2, then that's fine. If you batch recorded 2 podcast episodes, that's good, because let me tell you, creating content is just not easy. And also just talking. Hold on. Back to what I was saying was, so batch creating your content. So if you can only do 2 podcasts, video or audio, then that's good. Now, audio, I know I could do more, but when I'm doing video and audio, I at least do I only batch create 2 podcast episodes at a time, because I don't want to overwhelm myself. And also, I've noticed when I did extra, I became tired, and I even look tired in my videos and stuff. So that's why I only stick to my limit. So my batch creating days, well, let's say for me, my batch creating days are Tuesday. Well, it depends. So let's create an example of your batch creating days. Say Mondays and Thursdays are your batch creating days. And on Mondays, you create Mondays, you create your business episodes. And then Thursdays or Saturdays, you batch create self-care topics. So you got two different business educational topics, and then you got 2 self-care content topics, or not even business educational, or 2 personal development topics, and 2 self-care topics. So that way you have 4 different videos that you have already up and ready and uploaded. That way you can stay consistent, and you're not a one-hit wonder, because we're going into this new year. We're not no more a one-hit wonder. Okay, we're going to consistently be uploading our podcast episodes. So so step number 8 is definitely important, to batch create your content. so that you can stay consistent with your podcast, and also choosing your batch creation days. So that it can help you with staying consistent in that way. When it comes to uploading your podcast, you already have a podcast already up, just in case you don't even feel like creating content. Because let's face it, sometimes we don't be feeling like it. We don't be feeling like talking. We don't feel like, especially when we in those moods where we just, like we just in that state. So you already have a backup where, oh, all right, cool, I already got upload ready for the week, so yeah. So step number 9 is to market your podcast. Create a marketing plan of exactly on how you're going to market and promote your podcast. So let's get into marketing your podcast and what that actually looks like. So let me share an example of a quick marketing strategy that I use. So let's just say, without all the content, we already have our brainstorm list. We already planned out our content. We already know who we are our target audience. We know our niche that we are creating, which is self-care, and we know our content themes and pillars and etc. So we did that all in step 1, step 2, and step 3. So now that we already know how to plan out our content. So now with a marketing strategy, this is one of my strategies that I use. So let's say for social media, you're going to do one social media post per day. Now, so for social media, one post per day. For your audio podcast, for your podcast, one audio podcast and one YouTube video per week. And for your email newsletter, you're gonna write out a one email per day email letter. Also on your Substack, one Substack newsletter per day. Also, Pinterest, one pin per day. Facebook, one Facebook post per day. And also going live. Choose the platforms that you want to go live on, and go live once per week. So I usually go live on Instagram. Usually, and I could have recorded this, but usually on my old podcast, my strategy was definitely going live and recording my podcast on Instagram Live. Listen, when I was doing that, my views was 500 and 800 views. So I'm definitely keeping that into my strategy, because people actually are interested in starting a podcast, and they're actually interested in seeing you really be in action in real time. Sharing the behind the scenes. Basically, going live is you connecting and also sharing it behind the scenes of how you are actually recording your podcast. And you also did 3 different types of pieces of content at one time. You're creating a video for YouTube with your camera. You're also going live on Instagram with your on live, and you're also creating an audio podcast. So you knock that out at one time. So is that not being productive? Okay. Period. So even if you say you missed out on posting on social media, okay, go online, go live and record your podcast episode. Even if you were already recording a podcast episode, you could create another one just so that when you upload the audio on your Spotify, people love to feel your interaction. They love to see you interact and how you engage and how you talk and how you answer people in the comments. So when you are going live, I'm going to make a video, another podcast separate episode about tips on going live and the things you should do. But the tips is definitely if they are commenting on your live, please respond back. Don't just keep running on with your conversation and you're not engaging with your audience. Because if you're not engaging with your audience and you're not answering their questions, or you're not asking, how your day going, and they comment, oh, mine's is good, how is yours? And you just keep running on like you didn't hear, like you didn't see that comment, they will leave. Your audience will not support you and they will leave. So it's definitely important to have even if you're not selling a product, you're selling yourself. So it's definitely important to have customer service at all times. Now my camera want to decide to, dip off on me. All right, so yeah, so definitely have customer service when it comes to your business. Now, step number 10, create a weekly workflow for your business and a SOP for everything you do with your business. Now, your workflow, your weekly workflow is different than your SOP. Now, your SOP is a intricate, detailed, step by step of what you do manually in your podcast consistently, so that way you don't build up any errors. Now, your weekly workflow podcast, it's like, okay, Monday I'm gonna script out my episodes. So you got business administration Mondays, I'm gonna script out my podcast episodes, create emails in my Substack newsletter, and maybe if you have time, create a digital product or a free lead magnet. Those are, and then Tuesday, your content creator days, you're going to actually create your video for your podcast and create the audio. Wednesdays, you're going to edit. Thursdays, you're going to create your digital product for your podcast. Friday, you're going to post on social media or go live. Saturdays, you're going to editing Saturdays. So you see how a weekly workflow. Now, a SOP, stay tuned for the next podcast episode. We're going to share with you what a SOP is for and why you definitely need one. And once you be able to grow your podcast, a SOP is definitely important when it comes to training, if you decide to hire out and, it helps you with training your, whoever you decide to bring on to work for you, so that you can have free room, so they can look at the SOP and say, oh, okay, this is the job description of everything that I have to do for this podcast, or etc. So so really quick, a SOP stands for standard operational procedures. So we will be getting more into that in podcast episode, the next podcast episode. So you definitely want to stay tuned for that. We already created a YouTube SOP, but do not worry, for the month of April we'll be starting off our how to start a YouTube channel in the self-care niche. So baby, we breaking this thing down, okay? But if you love this so far, and I know this was long, I hope when I edit it, I hope it's not that long. But when you are actually starting out, sometimes you don't need you don't need a short podcast. When you are learning how to do something, sometimes it does take you an hour to learn it, or to hour to consume it. So I really hope that you made it this far, and these 10 steps definitely helped you with your podcast. Now, a bonus. Now let me share this bonus with you really quick. So streams of income ideas that we touched on just a little bit, but streams of income ideas that you can create from your podcast is Spotify ads and YouTube ads. So you're getting 2 different streams of income right there. Also, drop shipping with Printify. Also, starting your online e-commerce brand with Shopify. Also, digital products. Digital products is really at an all-time high right now. So digital products that you can create for yourself, or done for you digital products that I will be sharing more about you in the podcast series coming soon. And brand deals. So, in my first podcast episode, I shared a little bit about my first YouTube channel and how we was monetized on that channel, and how I received brand deals from that channel, and networking with small business owners, and also sharing with you how I received some of those brand deals as well. So make sure you tune in to our first podcast episode. The links will be in the description box, and please make sure you grab our free podcast and brainstorming list in our description box below, as well as if you want a full in-depth on how to start your self-care podcast, then grab our $27 free grab our $27 self-care ebook, so that you can learn the more and full in depth on how to start your self-care podcast episodes. Thank you so much for watching. And if you're watching us on Spotify, please make sure you hit that download button. And if you're watching on YouTube, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you till next time. All right, bye.